Welcome to Module 1 of our MuleSoft course. Before you can build anything real, you need to understand the core components, the basic building blocks that every single Mule application is made of, no matter how simple or complex. In this module, we'll cover flows, the Mule event, the core message processors, routers, scopes, and error handling. By the end, you'll be able to read any Mule flow and understand exactly what it's doing. Let's dive in. Everything in Mule happens inside a flow. A flow is a sequence of steps that a message moves through, from the moment it enters your application to the moment it leaves. Every flow starts with a source, something that triggers it, like an HTTP listener waiting for a request, or a scheduler firing on a timer. After the source, the message passes through a chain of processors, one after another, each one doing something to the data or the logic. You can also break logic into subflows, reusable pieces you can call from multiple places, similar to a function in traditional programming. As a message moves through a flow, it's wrapped in something called the Mule event. Now look carefully at the shape of this, because most tutorials draw it wrong, including the version I showed you before. The Mule event is the outer container. Inside the Mule event sits the Mule message, and inside the Mule message are two things, attributes and the payload. Variables are inside the Mule event too, but they sit outside the Mule message. That nesting is not decoration. It tells you how the data behaves. The payload is the actual data, the body of the message. Attributes are metadata about that payload set by whatever connector received it. HTTP headers, query parameters, a file name. Because attributes and payload live together inside the Mule message, when a new connector receives the message, they get replaced together as a pair. Variables are different. Variables are yours. You create them. They live in the event outside the message, and they survive while the payload is replaced underneath them. That is exactly why a variable is where you park something you need to keep. Knowing what is inside the event is only half of it. You also need to know how to reach each part, and this is the reference you will come back to constantly in your first months. Every part of the Mule event has its own accessor and data weave, and they are not interchangeable. Payload, variables, attributes, and error each have their own keyword. Here is the whole thing on one screen. And to make it concrete, keep this simple flow in mind. An HTTP listener receives a request, a logger writes something out, and a database connector stores it. At each of those 3 points, different parts of this event are available to you. Now let's walk through each block, one at a time. Start with the payload. To get the whole thing, you write hash, square bracket, payload. That is it, just the word payload. It gives you the entire body, whatever came in, or whatever the last processor produced. To get a single field out of it, you use a dot and the property name. Payload.property name. So if your payload is a JSON object with a customer ID inside it, that is payload.customer ID. And keep this in your head. The payload is replaced, never edited. The moment a component sets a new payload, the old one is gone. Payload always means whatever is in the event right now, at this exact point in the flow, not what came in at the start. Variables next. You read a variable with vars.variable name. Notice the S. It is vars, plural, always, even when you only have one variable. That trips up almost everyone in their first week. You create a variable with set variable, and from that point forward in the flow, vars. That name gives you the value back. Variables travel with the event through the whole flow. They survive the payload being replaced underneath them, and they survive a flow reference into another flow. What they do not survive is a network boundary. If you call another application over HTTP request, your variables do not go with it. Attributes. These are the metadata that arrived with the message, and their structure depends on the connector that received it. For an HTTP listener, there are 3 you will use constantly. A query parameter, the part after the question mark in a URL, is attributes.query_params. The parameter name. An HTTP header is attributes.headers. The header name. And a URI parameter, the variable part of the path itself, is attributes.URI_params. The parameter name. Notice all 3 are read the same way. You just pick the right group. And remember, attributes are read only from your side. You do not set them, the connector sets them, and the next connector replaces them. And error handling. Inside an error handler you get one more object, error, on its own. Error gives you the full error object. Error.description gives you the readable message, and that is the one you want in your logger. Error.detail description gives you the longer version. Error.cause gives you the underlying exception that actually caused the failure, which is what you want when you are debugging. And error.error type is how you identify what kind of error it was. To build the full type name as text, you join the namespace and the identifier. Error.errortype.namespace ++, error.errortype.identifier. That gives you something like HTTP:/connectivity. That string is what you match on when you decide to handle different failures in different ways. The simplest building blocks inside a flow are message processors. Set payload changes what the payload is. Set variable stores a value for later use in the flow. Logger writes information out for debugging and monitoring without changing the message at all. And transform message, powered by data weave, reshapes data from one format into another, say, converting XML into JSON. These four are the ones you'll use constantly, and almost every other component in Mule builds on the same idea. Take the current event, do something specific, and pass it along. Not every message should take the same path. The choice router lets you branch, like an if-else statement. You define conditions using a simple expression language, and the first matching conditions route gets executed. If nothing matches, a default route catches it. This is how you handle, for example, sending premium customers down one path and standard customers down another, all within the same flow. Two more routers matter a lot in practice. Gather sends a copy of the same message down multiple routes at once, in parallel, and then waits for all of them to finish before combining the results. It's how you call three different systems simultaneously instead of one after another. For each does the opposite kind of work. It takes a collection, like a list of orders, and processes each item one at a time through the same set of steps, similar to a loop in traditional programming. Folks group a set of processors together so they behave as one unit. The try scope is the most common. It wraps a section of your flow so you can catch and handle errors locally, without an error in one section crashing the whole flow. The async scope runs its contents in the background, on a separate thread, so the main flow doesn't have to wait for it to finish, useful for things like sending a notification that doesn't need to block the response. Errors are inevitable, so Mule gives you structured error handling. On-error continue catches an error, lets you handle it, for example by returning a friendly error message, and then continues the flow as if nothing happened. On-error propagate also catches the error, but after handling it, lets the error keep moving upward, which typically stops the flow and returns a failure response. Choosing between them is really about one question. Should this flow keep going after something goes wrong, or should it stop here? Let's connect the pieces. A request comes in through an HTTP listener, which starts the flow. A choice router checks the request type. Inside one branch, a try scope wraps a call to a backend system, with on-error continue returning a fallback response if that call fails. A transform message step, using data weave, reshapes the response into the format the caller expects, and a logger records what happened for monitoring. That's a complete, realistic flow, built entirely from the core components we just covered. You now know the core components, flows, the Mule event, message processors, routers, scopes, and error handling. Every Mule application, no matter how large, is built from these same pieces combined in different ways. In the next module, we'll get hands-on with the Anypoint platform and Anypoint Studio, so you can start building and running flows like these yourself. To recap, a flow is a sequence of processors that a message travels through, starting from a source. The Mule event carries a payload, attributes, and variables through the journey. Core message processors like set payload, set variable, logger, and transform message do the basic work. Routers like choice, scatter gather, and for each control the path a message takes. Scopes like try and async group behavior together. And error handling through on-error continue and on-error propagate decides what happens when something breaks. That's the foundation. Everything else in this course builds on it.